Aquí estamos at Cuento Sandwiches in Doral with my friend Seth Burger Beast that you may know. But it is 3:05 p.m. and we're here having a Cafecito provided by Cuento Sandwiches. It is tu café for those that are not familiar. Cheers. Salvaje. Mijo, tú no juegas. Okay, I guess I gotta, ponerme las pilas, if you will.
I've been drinking coffee longer.
It's actually kind of triggering because the last time I had tu café, it was spilled all over my face at a wrestling match. Thanks to you, because I think you were behind that because you were the ones that put me in contact with them.
I would love to.
And it was on my birthday too, so
you probably deserve it.
Yeah. But yeah, they're great. Tu café is great. Thank you for putting me on to them. But I am here with Seth, better known as Burger Beast, somebody that I used to look up to as well. I had but yeah, not anymore. Not anymore. Talk about heels. For those that understand wrestling terminology, the biggest heel in the Miami food scene right here. I started my own, or tried starting my own blog or Miami cultural thing many years ago. Now to consider you a friend, or at least I consider you a friend. I know you may not feel the same way. It is an honor to be here with you, sitting down and sharing un cafecito contigo. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, man. Thanks so much for having me. I was not aware about that story, but to kind of give a background on why I find this all funny, I'm constantly in jodedor mode, so I'm always trying to prank somebody, right?
Yeah.
And so when we first spoke on the phone, my goal was to just drive you crazy, essentially. And
it worked. It's funny because we were doing an event. For those that don't know, we were working on an event together, and it was I think we were doing a pop-up, and we were doing some sort of soda collab, and vintage sodas, and people were bringing vintage sodas, and we wanted to collaborate, a three-way collab between a brewery, us at Union Beer Store, and yourself, to collaborate on a soda-flavored beer. So I tried getting you to meet at Lincoln's Beard, and I mentioned that I said, can you meet us at Lincoln's Beard in Westchester?
That was the trigger. That was the trigger.
And your first response ever to me was, oh, you mean fake Chester. Right. I was like, okay, no, it's okay. We can go to do it at J. Wakefield in Wynwood. And I think you said, no, you don't go down that way.
I said, fuck that shit.
Yeah, exactly, pretty much. So then I contacted our mutual friend, Alfredo, a.k.a. Bendy. I asked him, I was like, yo, is Burger Beast kind of a dick? And then he sent me a screenshot that he had sent that to you. I'm like, oh no, Burger Beast's gonna think I'm talking shit about him. So your first impression is very heelish. And that's why I used to look up to you. Ever since that day, not so much. I don't look up to you as much anymore. No, I'm getting triggered. I've had hot coffee on me before, specifically this same coffee.
I chug that.
But since we're talking about heels, I do have a question. Actually, I have many heelish, I guess, questions for you. What would you consider in Miami, and we can talk food items, what is the biggest heel item in Miami culinary? For example, to give you an example, for me, it's raisins in picadillo. No raisins in picadillo.
That's disgusting.
That's the biggest. I think raisins are the biggest heel for me.
I think
some people would say salami in a Tampa Cuban.
No, in a real Cuban.
That's the baby face.
In a real Cuban. Listen, there's so many things and so many rules that I've created in my mind over food. But I would probably say cheese on a frita.
Really?
Because that's not old school. And I used to think it wasn't true that old Cubans would get angry over this. But I was at Cuban Guys in Hialeah one day, and the girl asked him, ¿Quiere queso en tu frita? And the guy lost his mind. I mean, he started screaming at her.
Oh, man.
And I was like, I can't believe this, because I had heard that this was true, but I'd never seen it happen. Yeah. And I asked, does this happen often? And they're like, yeah, a couple times a week, which makes sense. In Cuba, if you're not familiar with the frita, the Cuban hamburger, it was street food. There was no cheese. It was just, seasoned with beef, with, sliced potatoes, usually some sort of starch, because sometimes they didn't have potatoes, and it was on a flauta of bread, like the long bread, just sliced in pieces, because the rolls that we see here wasn't really a thing in Cuba. And no one actually does a real deal authentic version of the one from Cuba, right?
Which is what I was going to ask you. It's let's put this myth to an end. Does a frita have, is it all ground beef, or is there chorizo in a frita?
It is all ground beef.
It is an all ground beef.
With seasoning. Even if you go to old recipes, some people, you are going to find recipes because there's always going to be variations. Let's compare it to a hot dog cart, right? Because this started in the late 20s or 30s. You're not putting filet mignon on in a hot dog, right? So you're using the lowest common denominator. So you're using ground beef. Chorizo is more expensive. You're just going to get beef and season it with cumin, garlic, paprika, the sort of flavors that are in a chorizo to kind of give you the illusion that that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And then kind of subtle things happened. You know, they came over here in the 60s. In the 70s, El Rey La Fritas introduced putting what people call now frita mojo, which is an absolutely ridiculous name.
What is that?
Well, when El Rey La Fritas smashes their little balls of beef, they squeeze a liquid on it.
Correct.
And so what that seasoning is pretty much everything that's in the beef with a little bit of hot sauce, some tomato paste, and water.
Gotcha.
And what it does is it keeps the frita moist, and you have a tendency when you're cooking these things, if you see certain places who don't know how to mix it properly, it burns.
Yeah.
So then the frita looks charred. It won't taste charred. It's just because the excessive amount of seasoning in it causes it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that when I've made it myself, and then it gets that charring on top. Let's talk about the Cuban sandwich.
All right.
All right.
What are we going to talk about?
Let's talk about the real Cuban sandwich.
The real delicious one. All right.
Salami or no salami?
Of course.
Yeah.
This is my stand. I don't exist in a world where adding salami to a sandwich makes it worse. So when people use that as an argument, that's preposterous. It's just a ridiculous comment. You're not going to tell me you add salami, you're like, oh, there went the sandwich. That's just here in Miami that they wanted to defend their terrain, so they pretend that by adding salami, and I don't have an issue discussing Cuban sandwiches with people. I have an issue when we're discussing it and you've never had the Tampa Cuban, so you really have no basis to
be a little
compare
open, be a little open-minded and consume and see what's out there.
Well, I mean, if you have the Tampa Cuban and you prefer the Miami, that's one thing. But 99% of the people who want to get into a disagreement with me over it have never had the Tampa one. So how could you say the Miami one's better?
Exactly.
That makes no
sense. I get it. I am going to say I do love salami, and I enjoy it a lot on the Cuban sandwich. So thank you for sending me over to Flan Factory that one time in Tampa to try it.
You know what we should do is do a blind taste test.
We should host it and have everybody line up.
Have people try the Tampa Cuban and the Miami blindfolded and see which sandwich they really like, and then we're going to find out.
I think it's a great idea.
Then you hit them with the belt.
Yes. If they choose Miami, we just hit them. We just become Tampanians. But as we're talking about sandwiches, there's a beautiful sandwich right in front of us here from Cuento Sandwiches. If you can tell us about this beautiful sandwich.
Well, I haven't tried it yet.
All
so
right,
this is they just started recently. So this is a Monte Cristo. If you're not familiar with that sandwich, its origins, I believe, weird as it sounds, are from Disneyland. The original version. It's a ham, turkey, American, Swiss, battered, deep fried powdered sugar with the dipping sauce. I believe in this case it's guava based on the color I see there.
Qué rico, man.
And the batter here, to kind of differentiate, they're using mateba in the batter. So if you're into, the Miami Hispanic soft drinks.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question for you since we're talking about the soft drinks. Jupiña, Materva, or you don't bet? Pick one. Oh, I don't have a feeling because, of course, you're a heel, right? You're going to say none.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm big fans of the brands themselves, but I don't really drink those.
No.
I drink Coca-Cola.
Yeah. Now we can do the.
That's gonna be yours. Look, this one right here. That one. I'm also big on food dingleberries, like things that just fall off.
You said the batter is Materva batter, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then that should be, I'm guessing, going on.
Hoy sí is a cheat day. Excuse me for talking with my mouthful. Te rompiendo la dieta. Pero es okay, porque esto es, mira, puro proteína.
Yes, it's delicious, and I knew I was going to get powder. You cannot escape.
You sure that's powder? You sure that's powder? Because I walk in Miami, and cuidado.
Well, yeah, they're going to think it's something else now.
I'll tell you one more.
Well, if I was into that, I wouldn't be this big. So I think that's a whole other thing.
Perfect. Yeah, babita. I respect your opinion, and I'm glad that you're on and being able to talk to the people. Even though you're saying that the Tampa Cuban is a better Cuban, I value your opinions and your thoughts because you've always seemed very passionate about the culinary scene, the food industry, how everything started, the history behind it all. So I should have started with that in the intro, is that thank you for everything you've done for our community and the information and the passion behind it all, which leads me to want to ask, like, how did this all, like, start? Like, what was it that drove you converting over and, like, coming over to this, like, the culinary scene, right? Or the blogging scene and how it all started, or what drove you mainly into doing it? Or was it strictly just based off of, like, passion and love for it? Because it seems like there's a tie with the culture, with the city. Like, you're a historian.
Right.
You know? Mm-hmm. So it's not only your love for food and for all things, but you have a love for all things Miami, it seems.
All things Miami, also things that I grew up with, so you're talking old attractions, that sort of thing. Whatever I'm into, I go full force into. So growing up, I played guitar, and so I was really into music. Then I became obsessed with film. That led to my wife Marcella and I opening for a short time, a movie store, horror cult film store in Westchester.
Damn.
Stood out like a sore thumb. You can see, skulls and pumpkin heads on the design. People would drive by. Yep. One person put her finger, she went like this, made a cross to the outside. Yeah, it was pretty funny. We found their music. Also, it was this is pre everyone really being into horror movies. So we have a horror category for rent that has a cannibal section and it has a slasher section. And someone came to interview me for the Miami Herald, and she came in, turned around and left, and I was
wow.
I didn't know she was a reporter. Then she came back. She must have been 18 or 19. And then she came back with her mom because she was she was actually kind of scared of the store. It had low lighting. The walls were dark gray. All the shelving were black. And then you see cannibal, and I'm sure that would just freak anyone out. Yeah. Which, of course, we loved. Yeah. Through all that time, I did retail management. It just wears on you when you're dealing with the public constantly over and over. The 2 years of the movie store were like a break. I went back into retail management, and when I finally hit my breaking point, I told my wife Marcella, I was like, I need to find some other outlet. And she's like, why don't you just write about food, in particular burgers? And she's the one who said you should call it the Burger Beast. Yeah. So I went on GoDaddy, and it was available, and I bought it. And I sat on the name for probably like 6 months. And we went to a place that just recently closed, Eastside Pizzeria. I went there because I had heard they had a great meatball sub. I wasn't writing anything at this point. I saw that they were doing a burger as a special. I asked about it. They were baking their own bun. They were hand patting the burger. This is the infancy of the Miami food scene, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In 2008, to find a phenomenal
it was pretty much non-existent. It was non-existent.
It was so hard. Now you can, go in every strip mall and find two probably.
Yeah.
If you even look at my original best burger list in Miami that came out in the Herald, it was like 7 burgers, and everyone's like, because that's what it was. Yeah. And I ate that burger. It was called the Swiss Alps burger, I think. And I wrote about it. I went home that night, and I loved it so much, I opened an account on Blogger, and I did my first post.
Nice.
And that was in September of 2008. And after that, I just started doing a post every day, finding something to write about. At the time, I managed a Metro PCS store in the Coral Gables. I was the store manager. Once the blog was around probably 8 or 9 months, I thought, man, I should do some sort of get-together. And this is how the event started. Did an event at John Martin's, which is across the street from the store I managed. Yeah. Because I ate there a couple of times a week. And we did an event, and 52 people showed up. I remember the number because I thought nobody was going to show up.
52 is a lot.
And
I thought, especially in Miami, to get 52 people to show up.
I thought no one was going to show up. And then I was like, well, I got to do an awards. Like, there's the Emmys and there's the Grammys. And I was like, I'm going to do the Birdies.
Oh, yeah. And
we did that for about 8-9 years. The first one was in John Martin's. We did that to celebrate the I believe it was the 1 year anniversary of my blog. And here's the crazy part. Unbeknownst to me, Yelp was just up and coming. Yelp had made that a get-together for him. So I was so preoccupied because I paid an artist to do the design for the poster. Yeah. We printed out the poster. We printed out shirts and stuff that we were throwing to people. And I'm in a few $100s, not knowing whether anyone's going to show up. I hid in the back of the restaurant. I honestly did not want to come out. And then at some point, someone's like, you're going to have to eventually come out. And we had had a bunch of the local writers vote, and so we gave out awards for best burger, best frita, best croqueta, a bunch of awards they have probably never seen before,
yeah,
right?
Of course.
There's like 200 something people there, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
I couldn't get through the crowd. I actually had to take a long way around because if I would have plowed through, it would have been like a football player just like slamming his way down the middle. I had to take the long way, and I got to the front. I was never able to move from the front because it was just so many people at the bar. And then Yelp had taken over if you've ever been in John Martin's, there's a room right when you come into your right. Yelp had taken over that whole room.
Oh, wow.
That's when I was like, I think I hit a nerve here, you know. And it was not only because I was writing about burgers, is because I wrote about burgers and I mentioned fritas and people were interested. And then I mentioned croquetas and I noticed people were interested.
Of course.
And at that point, that's not really what anyone was writing about.
Yeah.
So I'm here writing about Isla Canarias and people's like ears perked up, you know.
Yeah.
Mago de las fritas, el rey de las fritas.
So they're related to people that we all, that we all grew up here, and it relates to us because food that we grew up eating and now wanting to know where you can get the best one or whatnot. It seemed like that was like, you pretty much pioneered a movement, I think, with all of that. What is Burger Beast's favorite croqueta in Miami?
There's a lot. There's a lot of different ones, you know. I mean, we did an event for 9 years called Croqueta Palooza, which I think you might have attended.
Attended one of them, yeah.
Yeah. And that event was a lot of fun, but in this town, it's a very expensive thing to pull off events when you're doing it independently funded, like I did, and Marcela and I did, and it was a lot of work for both of us.
Yeah.
And you know what we got are a lot of people are like, hey, I want to do Croqueta Palooza, which what that means in Miami terms is I want to steal your idea from you.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, for the record, Croqueta Palooza is trademarked.
Yeah. Are you also? I feel like you pioneered. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you kind of helped in starting like the food truck movement down here in Miami. I remember you putting those events together a lot.
What happened is I happen to be. This is one of those being in the right place at the right time. My blog is probably about a little over the first Burger Awards had just happened, and then you started hearing rumbling that these trucks were starting to come out. Gastropod comes out. Chef Jeremiah just did Square Pie City.
Yeah.
You had Land Burger by Ingrid Hoffman. You had the Yellow Submarine, which now exists as a totally different named restaurant, Rock That Burger in Kendall.
Oh, wow.
And these initial trucks were coming out, and I was given the opportunity by the Miami Herald to have. They're like, here's this space at this Jarring Art Festival, and you can do and invite whatever restaurants you want. And I was like, well, let's invite the trucks. Now, a lot of people didn't even know they existed, but I had been following them because, again, this is where I'm saying that almost all the original 10 trucks had a burger on it.
Oh, wow.
And because I was always constantly searching for a great burger in town, I was like, here it is. And even like, you know, we're here in Cuento Sandwiches.
Yeah.
That's how I met them. They used to own a place called the Purple People Eatery, which is one of our favorite. And they won an event, I believe, at Tobacco Road. The original Tobacco Road.
Nice.
And so we did one at the Adrian Art Center. It was a madhouse. It was supposed to be an art event that was probably the hottest day on earth. That it always seemed like it was going to rain, and it never rained. And Fireman Derek, who's now got a bunch, he was in the tent there. Stephanie from Crybaby Creamery, she used to have a place called Sweetness. She had a tent there. Chef Michael Schwartz from Michael's Genuine, he had a little hot dog cart that he was serving food out of.
Yeah.
And it was a different world in the Miami food scene. Like I said, it's like a lifetime ago
and
when you think about it.
It's beautiful that you go to many cities and I feel like their cultures are established already, right? And I feel like we were alive and a part of a movement like that where it's the culture in Miami, the culinary culture, was still developing and evolving, and we were a part of that. Like, it's still, like, now it's become somewhat established with what you're finding. But back then, nothing was, even like the craft beer scene back then, like, we were a part of that era of seeing the growth, like all the names you mentioned and seeing them now and how they've grown and evolved. For example, we're sitting in Cuento Sandwiches, when they had one of the food trucks before. Like, it's crazy. It's just crazy to see the growth of not only the culinary scene, but the culture here in Miami.
Even the craft beer, that's the other thing, right? So when the craft beer thing starts happening, we had done an event called Hot Dog Fest. We had craft beers. Okay. So it was a hot dog festival with craft beer. Most people are like, yeah, Heineken?
Yeah, it's still no, like that.
It wasn't Hollywood, did it?
Yeah, and I feel like it's still like that, but we've evolved, and I feel like the culture has definitely been established, or it's establishing itself and growing, evolving. But I'm going to let you off the hook with the heelish tactics here, and we're gonna go into some babyface terminology here.
All right.
Now, would you say, I think there's somebody in your past growing up that was involved in some wrestling. Would you say growing up that gentleman was a babyface for you growing up, or somebody you would look up to?
You mean my grandfather?
Yes.
So I never met my grandfather. My grandfather was born in Cuba, wrestled, made his name in Venezuela, which is why, even though my dad's Cuban, both sides of both of my parents are Cuban, he was born in Caracas because my grandfather was wrestling there at the time. My grandfather wrestled under a mask under the name Cruz Diablo. He was only 35 when he passed away. They had just gotten to the United States. He got cancer, and he passed away within 3 months.
Damn.
He was training with my dad they wanted to be a tag team here in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that never came to pass, but we have a lot of pictures. And what's cool is he trained kids in Cuba for the Olympics, and I found the first kid he trained, which is incredible. I found the guy on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
And I tried getting the guy to talk to me. He did not want to talk to me. But he did send he sent me a really nice message about my grandfather.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Damn, that's awesome. Now that you mentioned the tag teams, is there a spot or somebody in the Miami culinary scene or a pop-up that you would love to collaborate with? Like, who's somebody you have not worked with yet in the scene that you would love to do a collaboration with? I know you just did one with Raul, with Are You Hungry Grill.
Yeah, we've done it a few times. Like even Cuento, they used to be the chefs at Crackers when I owned it. And I'm not going to say names, but, David. I kind of just did. I gave him a ranch recipe. That's what I would do for our ranch for our fries. And he had the nerve to bring it back to me and add sour cream to it. That's all I'm saying.
But now to pretty much to use the term "the go home," right? To wrap things up in wrestling terminology, I have one final question for you, and it is if you can tell me a time where you felt like in your life that you had to ponerte las pilas.
Yeah, I think it was that time. I was at my wit's end in retail management. And I would say if this was like a Lifetime movie, I would have been sitting at the end of my bed crying.
Yeah.
That's what I remember it being. It's probably nothing like that. Marcella would probably be the best person to tell you. And she saw I was just incredibly frustrated doing retail management for so long. And she said... Shout
out to Marcella. Where you at?
And that gave me the outlet to continue doing that. And, that September 2008, I started the blog. March 2011, I left it, and I started doing Burger Beast full time.
Oh, yeah.
So we went to work, right? And we did it. Did the blog, and still to this day, there's a lot of stuff we do. We did a calendar with a pinup photographer. We called it Burgers and Broads, and it was all pinups with burgers. I mean, you name it. I've done Wiener Bash, a hot dog festival.
I remember that one.
Croqueta Palooza, hamburger house party. We did a road trip with Camacho Cigars. We were gone for 27 days on a road trip doing our burgers. I wrote a book in 2019, which I can't believe is 6 years old already, about the history of burgers.
And you've toured the country.
Almost all the east states on the east side of the United States. And we always, and we're guided by old school burger joints.
Oh, yeah.
I got invited to White Castle headquarters.
That's awesome.
Wendy's headquarters, Crystal headquarters, A&W. I love I get taken in. We get to see old artifacts. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, you heard it here. Thank you to Cultura TV. Thank you to Cuento Sandwiches. Thank you to the man Burger Beast. All it takes to change your life is a ponerte la pila.